Been meaning to get this off my chest for a while. It's one of those stories that sounds fake until you've seen this kind of behavior up close. This all went down maybe 6 or 7 months ago, back when the weather was starting to get better. I was with this girl, Kim, for a little over 2 years, and for the first year, things were honestly pretty good. Normal relationship stuff. We'd go out, have fun, meet each other's friends. The usual, there were no red flags. Or if there were, they were so small I didn't recognize them. She was smart, funny, and we had a lot in common. The change was gradual, a slow burn that I barely noticed at first. It started with her spending more and more time online, specifically on those short video apps and social media sites where everyone is an expert on relationships and psychology. Suddenly, our normal conversations started getting seeded with strange new vocabulary. Words like emotional labor, gaslighting, patriarchal programming, and toxic masculinity became part of her everyday speech. At first, I just thought it was some phase, a new interest. I'd nod along, trying to understand what she was talking about. But then it started being directed at me. Everything I did was put under a microscope. A simple movie night turned into a full-blown seminar. I remember suggesting we watch an old action movie I loved as a kid. Something completely harmless. She agreed. But halfway through, she paused it. She turned to me with a serious look and asked if I'd ever considered the male gaze inherent in the film's cinematography. I had no idea what to say. It was a movie about a guy fighting aliens. My confusion was apparently the wrong answer. She explained with the patience of a teacher correcting a slow student that my uncritical enjoyment of such media was a symptom of my ingrained patriarchal conditioning. She told me I needed to be more conscious of the media I consume. The rest of the movie was unbearable. Every 5 minutes, she would point something out, see how the female character is just there to be rescued. Classic damsel trope. Notice how the dialogue reinforces harmful male stereotypes of strength over emotion. It was exhausting. I just wanted to turn my brain off and watch some explosions. This pattern started bleeding into every aspect of our life. My weekly game night with my best buddy was a particular point of contention. We'd been doing it for years. Long before I met Kim, it was our way to decompress, talk trash, and just hang out. For her, it became a toxic male space. She claimed it was a form of escapism, a way for me to avoid doing the real work in our relationship. She said me spending a few hours with my friend was me avoiding my responsibility to provide her with emotional support. I tried to explain that it was healthy to have separate hobbies, that it didn't take anything away from our relationship. That explanation was dismissed as me being defensive and unable to handle criticism about my male fragility. It got to the point where I'd feel a knot in my stomach every time I planned to see my buddy. I knew it would lead to an argument, or worse. The silent treatment was her favorite tool. She'd be upset about something, but would refuse to tell me what it was. She called it creating space for me to reflect on my actions. In reality, it was a test. I was supposed to guess what I did wrong. I'd spend hours running through every interaction we had that day, trying to pinpoint the mistake. Did I use the wrong tone? Did I forget to validate her feelings about a post she saw online? Did I fail to notice she was upset? 9 times out of 10, I'd guess wrong. Then would come the lecture. She'd tell me that the fact I couldn't figure it out on my own was proof that I was emotionally stunted. It was my job, she insisted, to do the emotional labor of anticipating her needs without her having to state them. She read somewhere online that having to ask for what you want is a burden placed on women by an unfailing patriarchy. So I was just supposed to know. Every day felt like walking through a minefield. The rules were constantly changing, and I was always losing. I tried to talk to her about it. I suggested maybe we could just communicate directly, tell each other what's on our minds. That suggestion was framed as me trying to avoid accountability. She told me I was trying to make her do all the work by explaining her own feelings to me, which was unfair. It was a circular argument with no escape. My friend saw it. My buddy would ask me if I was okay. He said I seemed tired all the time, walking on eggshells. He was right. I was constantly drained. But I still cared about her. And I kept thinking maybe we could get back to how things were in the beginning. I thought if I just tried harder, read more of the articles she sent me, and learned her new language, I could make it work. Looking back, I was just enabling it. During this time, the one place I felt I could actually relax was at my weekly board game club. It was just a casual group of people who met at a local shop to play games. No drama. No psychological warfare. There was a woman there named Diane. We weren't close friends or anything. More like friendly acquaintances. She was just normal. She was sharp, funny, and really good at strategy games. Our interactions were always simple and straightforward. We'd talk about the game, joke about a bad roll of the dice, maybe chat for a few minutes after about a new movie or something. There was never any subtext, no hidden meanings or tests. It was just a conversation. I didn't think much of it at the time, but being around her was like a breath of fresh air. It was a reminder of what normal human interaction felt like, and it highlighted how twisted my home life had become. I never complained about Kim to anyone there. It was my one escape, and I didn't want to bring my problems into it. The final crack in the foundation happened on a Tuesday. I think it was a genuinely awful day. A big project I'd been working on had hit a major snag, and it was looking like months of effort might be wasted. I came home feeling completely defeated. Just gutted. All I wanted was a little bit of support. A hug. Maybe an "I'm sorry you had a rough day." I found Kim on the couch scrolling on her phone. I sat down and started to tell her about what happened. I wasn't overly dramatic. Just laid out the facts and said, I felt terrible about it. She listened. Or at least, she looked like she was listening with that intense, analytical expression she got whenever she was about to pass judgment. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she told me that while she understood I was feeling upset, I should try to see this as a learning opportunity. A learning opportunity to fail better. She said I should examine my feelings of failure and how they are tied to a toxic masculine need to succeed and provide. She told me that my stress was a product of the very patriarchal system that I benefit from. I just stared at her, completely stunned. I wasn't looking for a sociological analysis of my bad day. I was just a guy whose day sucked, and I was talking to my girlfriend about it. I tried to explain that. I said, I don't need a lecture right now. I just kinda need a hug. That was a huge mistake. Her eyes narrowed. She accused me of weaponizing my emotions to silence her. She told me my request for a hug was a way to shut down a difficult but necessary conversation about my male privilege. She actually said the words, men's feelings are often used to derail important feminist critiques. My feelings about my own bad day were derailing a critique. Something inside me just broke. It was the complete and utter lack of empathy. The clinical detached way she processed my very real human emotion and turned it into another talking point for her online ideology. I wasn't her partner. I was her project. I was a case study. I didn't say anything else. I just got up and went into the other room. There was no fight. There was nothing left to fight about. I just felt empty. I realized I had been putting so much energy into a relationship where I wasn't even seen as a person. I was just a set of concepts to be deconstructed. I spent that night on the couch. Not because we fought, but because I couldn't stand the thought of being next to her. For the first time, I wasn't sad or angry. I was just done. The tank was empty. The next few days were quiet. We coexisted in the apartment like polite strangers. The usual tension was gone. Mostly because I had stopped trying. I stopped engaging. I gave short, simple answers. I didn't ask her about her day. I didn't try to guess why she was upset. I just disconnected, and I think that drove her crazy. Her entire dynamic with me was based on her having the moral and intellectual high ground, and me trying to climb up to her level. When I stopped playing the game, her power vanished. I'm guessing she talked it over with her best friend, who was just as terminally online as she was. They probably decided that my withdrawal was a form of passive-aggressive punishment. Another toxic male trait, They would have concluded that I needed a major wake-up call to show me how much I needed her. I can almost picture the conversation. Them scrolling through videos with titles like, "How to Make Him Realize Your Worth." And they would have stumbled upon the dumbest idea in the history of modern dating. The loyalty test breakup. The plan was simple and in their minds foolproof. She would break up with me. I would panic at the thought of losing her, and then I would come crawling back begging for forgiveness. This would reestablish her control and prove that I was truly committed. It would be the ultimate validation, proof that despite my flaws, I couldn't live without her. The execution came on a Friday evening. I was at home just cleaning up a bit, mentally preparing for another weekend of walking on eggshells. My phone buzzed. It was a long text from Kim. I opened it, expecting another article or a list of my recent transgressions. But it was different this time. It was formal, cold, and read like it was written by an HR department. Roy, after a period of deep introspection, I've concluded that our paths must diverge. I do not feel you are actively participating in the deconstruction of our relationship's toxic dynamics, and I need a partner who is fully committed to that journey. I wish you the best in your personal growth. Please respect my decision and my need for space. I read it once. Then I read it again to make sure I wasn't imagining things. I felt a dozen emotions all at once. But none of them were sadness. It wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't despair. It wasn't even anger. It was relief. A profound, soul-deep wave of pure, unadulterated relief. It was the feeling of a massive weight being lifted off my shoulders. The feeling of being able to breathe again after being underwater for too long. She had just given me the out I didn't even realize I was desperately searching for. She thought she was setting a trap. But she had just opened the cage door and let me fly out. I sat there for a minute looking at the message on my screen. A small smile crept onto my face. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to beg. All I had to do was agree. So, I typed out a reply. I kept it short, simple, and polite, mirroring her corporate tone. Kim, I understand. Thank you for our time together. I wish you all the best. I hit send without a moment of hesitation. Then, immediately after, I went through the methodical process of erasing her from my digital life. I deleted her contact information. I blocked her number. I went onto every social media platform and blocked her profile. I didn't do it out of anger or spite. I did it for peace. It was like closing a door on a room full of noise and stepping into a quiet hallway. Silence. The first thing I did after that was call my buddy. He picked up on the second ring. I said, "Hey, man, you're not going to believe this. Kim just broke up with me over text." There was a pause on his end, and then he asked, "Are you okay?" I started laughing. A genuine happy laugh. "Okay. I've never been better. I'm free." He laughed, too. A laugh of relief. He knew what I'd been going through. I'm so glad to hear that. To man, seriously, the bars are open, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I don't have to check in with anyone. It felt incredibly good to say that. Meanwhile, I can only imagine what was happening on her end. She probably got my text, showed it to her friend, and they both smirked. Say, he's in shock. One of them probably said, he's trying to play it cool. Give it a day. The panic will set in. They would have been sitting there confident in their strategy, waiting for the inevitable flood of calls and texts, waiting for me to fall apart so she could put me back together on her terms. They were about to be very, very disappointed. That first weekend of freedom was incredible. It was like the world had gone from black and white to color. I didn't have to check my phone every 10 minutes for a text that would require a carefully crafted, ideologically sound response. I could just exist. I spent Saturday just doing things for myself. I went to the gym, got a haircut, and bought a couple of new video games I'd been putting off because I knew they'd be labeled as a problematic male power fantasy. It was the most peaceful 24 hours I'd had in over a year. On my end, there was complete silence. No temptation to check on her. No curiosity. It was a clean break. On her end, I imagined the 2-4-hour mark passed with a growing sense of confusion. The confident smirks she shared with her friend probably faded. She must have expected me to break by then. A desperate phone call. A text message full of regret. Something, but there was nothing. The 48-hour mark, Sunday afternoon, is probably when the real anxiety kicked in. Her master plan wasn't just failing, it wasn't even registering. She was blocked. So, she couldn't see my online activity. She had no way of knowing what I was doing. The person who was so used to being in complete control, to being the arbiter of our relationships, every move was now completely in the dark. She was experiencing the one thing she couldn't stand, a total loss of power. That evening, feeling genuinely good about my life for the first time in ages, I thought about Diane from the game club. It wasn't a rebound thought. It was a clear, simple realization that I was now free to pursue something potentially good with someone who seemed normal and kind. I found her name in the club's group chat history and sent her a message. I kept it direct and honest. I told her I had recently become single and that I'd always enjoyed our chats, and I asked if she'd be interested in getting dinner sometime. I figured the worst she could say was no. She replied about an hour later. She said she was sorry to hear about my breakup, but would love to get dinner. Her reply was warm and simple. No games. No subtext. We set a date for the following Thursday. The rest of the week was just normal. Work was still work. But coming home to a quiet, drama-free apartment was a blessing. Thursday came around, and I met Diane at a small Italian place downtown. The date was reveille. We just talked for 3 hours. We talked about everything and nothing. Hobbies, travel, stupid stories from college. Our thoughts on which board games were overrated. She asked me questions and actually listened to the answers. I asked her questions and she gave genuine, straightforward replies. There wasn't a single moment where I felt like I was being analyzed or tested. She laughed at my jokes and I laughed at hers. It was effortless. At one point, I mentioned my stressful project at work. The same one that had earned me a lecture from Kim. Diane's response was, "Wow, that sounds really tough. I'm sorry you have to deal with that." That was it. That's all it took. Just a simple expression of empathy. It was so basic, yet it felt so profound after what I'd been used to. It was in that moment that I knew I had made the right decision. This was what a partnership was supposed to feel like. Supportive. Easy. We ended the night with a plan to see each other again that weekend. I walked her to her car, and we said goodnight. I went home feeling genuinely optimistic. It seems our date did not go unnoticed. A couple we knew from the game club was at the same restaurant. They didn't come over to say hi, but they must have seen us. One of them must have posted something online. Maybe an innocent picture of their own dinner where we were visible in the background laughing because on Friday the floodgates opened. While I was at work, I got a series of frantic texts. Not from Kim, but from a number I didn't recognize. It was her best friend. The first text was pure rage, something along the lines of how I was a disgusting pig for moving on so fast. She said, "I clearly never cared about Kim at all." I almost blocked the number right away. But then the next text came through, and it was pure gold. The tone shifted to desperation. She wrote that I had misunderstood everything. It wasn't a real breakup. It was a test. She spelled it out. A test of my loyalty. A test to see if I would fight for her. I just sat there reading the words on my screen. I started to laugh. It was so much more pathetic than I had even imagined. They were actually admitting to the manipulation. They were so desperate that they threw their whole strategy out in the open. The texts kept coming. The friend was pleading now, saying Kim was a wreck and that I needed to call her immediately to fix it. She said Kim was ready to forgive me for my initial reaction and wanted to talk about how we could rebuild trust. The absolute audacity of it was breathtaking. She breaks my trust with a manipulative game, and I'm the one who needs to rebuild it. I showed the texts to my buddy. He read them and just shook his head. A huge grin on his face. You dodged a nuke. My friend, he said. I didn't reply to any of the messages. I just blocked the friend's number. 2. I thought that would be the end of it. I severely underestimated her capacity for drama. The confrontation came a few days later. It was a Monday evening. Diane and I had spent a great weekend together. Hiking. And then just relaxing. She was supposed to come over that night to watch a movie. I got home from work, and as I was walking up to my front door, I saw someone waiting for me. It was Kim. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she had that frantic, cornered look. The second she saw me, she launched into it. There was no preamble. She started talking a mile a minute. Her voice high and strained. She said it was all a huge mistake. She repeated what her friend had texted, about how it was just a test. A stupid idea she got online. She was crying now, saying she just wanted me to show her that she mattered. That I wouldn't just let her go without a fight. Her whole speech was about her feelings, her needs, her insecurities. There wasn't a single word about how her actions might have affected me. I just stood there and listened, my keys in my hand. When she finally ran out of steam, she looked at me with these big, pleading eyes, expecting me to comfort her, to say it was all okay. I didn't. I just stayed silent for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. Then I spoke, and I kept my voice calm and even. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I told her that a relationship isn't a test. Trust isn't something you verify by setting traps for your partner. I explained that for the past year she had treated me not as a partner but as a flawed project that needed fixing. I said her test wasn't some isolated mistake. It was the logical conclusion of her entire worldview, where relationships are a power struggle, not a partnership. She had tried to manipulate my emotions to get a reaction she wanted, and that wasn't love. It was a game. I told her I had no interest in playing. Tears were streaming down her face. She started saying things like, "But I love you. I thought you loved me." I replied that love doesn't involve setting loyalty tests. It involves communication and respect, 2 things she had refused to give me for a very long time. You didn't end things to test me, I said, looking her straight in the eye. You ended them to control me? The only thing you tested was my patience. And you finally found the limit? She just kind of crumbled at that. She had no response. The truth was too blunt. It was at that exact perfectly timed moment that another car pulled up to the curb. It was Diane. She got out of her car, a bag of takeout in her hand, with a smile on her face. The smile vanished when she saw me standing with a crying woman on my doorstep. She looked confused, concerned. Kim's head whipped around to look at Diane. The crying stopped, replaced by a look of pure, venomous disbelief. Her jaw dropped. The public humiliation was a palpable thing. It was all right there on her face. I didn't say another word to Kim. I turned my back on her. I walked over to Diane, took the food from her, and gave her a small, reassuring smile. I said, "Hey, you're right on time. Let's go inside." I put my arm around her, and without a single glance back at Kim, I unlocked my door and led Diane inside, closing it firmly behind us. That was the last time I ever saw her in person. The aftermath was predictable. A few days later, mutual friends started texting me, asking what happened. Kim had launched a full-scale social media campaign. She posted long, vague statuses about betrayal and the shocking discovery of her ex's toxic and narcissistic true nature. She framed the story as her leaving a toxic man who then immediately and crew flaunted a new woman in her face to hurt her. She left out the part about the test. Of course, some of her friends believed her. I got a few angry messages which I ignored and blocked. But most people, especially those who knew us both, saw through it. They had seen how she treated me. They saw her constant need for drama. Her story didn't stick. Eventually, Even her closest friends got tired of the constant victim narrative and started to distance themselves. As for me, all things with Diane progressed beautifully. We're still together. It's the healthiest, most stable relationship I've ever been in. It's built on trust, communication, and laughing at the same dumb jokes. Sometimes I think back on that whole mess with Kim. She was so obsessed with deconstructing what she thought was toxic masculinity. She ended up becoming the most toxic person in the relationship. She wanted a man who would fight for her. In the end, she played a stupid game and lost everything. She didn't get a reformed boyfriend begging for her back. She got an empty apartment, blocked numbers, and the quiet, crushing knowledge that she had authored her own misery. And I got my freedom, a pretty good trade if you ask me.